Hello fellow bike people, I want to talk to you about classic BMX bikes. So when you think of classic BMX, you usually think of something from the 80s, like the Haro Freestylers or the old GT Performers or something like that, right? But there's classic bikes from every era of BMX. If you've seen my old video called The Dark Ages of BMX, I explained how BMX went from, kind of fun, but the bikes were really fragile in the 80s, to in the 90s the bikes were super overbuilt and heavy duty, and that meant they were super hard to ride, but they were damn near indestructible. And after that, coming into the 2000s, the 2010s, the bikes got pretty much near perfection, and that's why all the new high-end BMX bikes are so similar, is because there's essentially a perfect formula they all follow now. So talking about other classic BMX bikes in that Dark Ages era, something like the standard STA, which stood for the stronger than all. The whole point of that frame was just to be bomb-proof, and that kind of set the tone for that period of time. And after the standard STA and bikes in that vein of design, the next major step in BMX design is going to be like the bike I'm about to show you. This is a 2004 or a 2005 S&M Blackbike. This was, when I first got into BMX, something that was one of my dream bikes. I never thought I would be able to have a nice S&M build like this. The build quality on it's amazing. Like, the ride is really nice. It feels indestructible, but still feels modern enough to have a good ride quality. It's nice and responsive. Just a great all-around bike. So before I show you any more details about the bike, I got a little story to tell you involving the research on this thing. So when I picked this up on Kijiji last year, I didn't know exactly what it was. I knew it was a high-end bike just by looking at it and the parts on it. The only identifier I could see from the pictures was a Fit logo on the head tube here. It was only when I got it home and flipped it over did I realize that there's an S&M badge stamped into the gusset down here, and I was blown away. S&M is one of those companies that they've always been influential since day one. Their designs have always kind of set the tone for BMX going into the next period of BMX. So going back into the mid-80s, S&M was started by Chris Moeller and Greg Swingerover. The two of them made the company to be kind of a rock and roll, rebellious feeling BMX company. And their original bike, the K9 D-Zine, was basically like the premium bike of its day. It was ultra modern, it had really good build quality, it was one of the most desirable bikes. And then the next bike after that, Chris's signature bike, the Mad Dog, that was really what set S&M on the map. Like, that is an absolute classic. And they've had tons of other classics since. Like the dirt bike, they've been making that since back in the day. Even more recently, frames like the LTF, the LAF, things like that, they were really influential. Now when I picked this bike up and saw that it was an S&M, I recalled something about an article I read a few years ago about the history of the head tubes on these things. And I did some looking around and I found links to the article, which was on a website called The Merge. But The Merge is long since gone. Like, the website doesn't exist anymore and the article doesn't exist. I found a few other sites where I found some information, like Dig BMX had an article on S&M's book, and that seemed really helpful. I got some information from that. I also found some really useful information on 23 Mag, BMX Union, and BMX Museum, so I'll put links to all of that below. But I still couldn't find the article that specifically mentioned the story with the head tube design. So I actually contacted S&M, the company, on Instagram. They directed me to their customer service emailed them, and I was surprised to get a response back from Chris Moeller himself. I'll put a screenshot of the email up just so you can pause and read it if you want to. What Chris said is, they were the first BMX company to use the Pinarello-designed integrated headset. The first integrated headsets that were designed by Pinarello and made by Campagnolo used loose cage bearings. There was also no other integrated headset available at this time, which basically confirmed everything that I remembered, just with, a few details corrected. If you look at the head tube on this bike, the cups where the bearings press in, they're machined into the frame. It's not like older BMX bikes where the cups were separate from the frame and pressed into place. So this frame uses the integrated cup design and the modern sealed bearings inside, which are damn near indestructible. This is the universal head tube design in BMX for a reason, because it's the best option. So the other thing I asked in the email to S&M was if this was actually the first production model with the integrated headset or not. The response from Chris Moeller was, I think it was actually the Neil Wood signature race frame but if not, the Blackbike or the Behringer may have been the first. So I'm going to try and find pictures of the Neil Wood signature race frame and the Behringer frame, put them on screen now. But either way, this is one of the first bikes with the integrated head tube, and the Blackbike was essentially the all-around street model, which is by far the most popular style of freestyle BMX, at least in my area. So this is the frame in all its glory. You can see from the geometry, despite the fact that this thing is from either 2004 or 2005, it is a pretty modern looking bike. The tubing's a little bit thicker, the geometry's maybe a half a degree off from what you'd expect. The back end's not crazy long, it's fairly long, but nothing too crazy. Top tube is 20.5 inches, which is perfectly normal. Bottom bracket height doesn't feel anything too high or too low, it's a good neutral position. I don't know the exact measurement on it, but it feels really good to ride. Head tube, it's a little bit slacker than a lot of modern bikes, but not by a ton, and it still feels properly modern to ride for the most part. And here's that head tube I was talking about. You can see the machining where this is all part of the same tube. It's just relieved down on the outside, and then the proper shape is cut into the inside with that 45-degree contact angle for the bearing. And because this is one of the earlier frames to have this design, it's not quite as smoothly done and stylized as some of the more modern bikes, but I really like this heavy duty look. This is something you can also see on bikes like the early Fit models, like the early Fit S series, and I think it's a really good look. It just looks tough and heavy duty. Here's another unique feature of this frame. The old bottom bracket standard was the American style, which was the really big one that was designed to fit the one-piece cranks. Before mid-bottom brackets became popular, this was the higher end alternative. This is called a European bottom bracket. Essentially, the threading in there is like what you would find on a mountain bike. This bottom bracket cup threads in, and that contains the bearing, which lets you put a BMX crank in this. It's a cool design, it's not that common anymore, but the fun thing with these is it can let you convert a mountain bike to a BMX crank. In terms of components, I've tried to go mostly period correct with this build. So it's got the animal stem, that's a classic. It's got some old school Sunday forks. I think they're called the Sunday night forks. Wheels and tires, old We the People hub in the front and We the People tires, and an old Odyssey Hazard wheel set in the back. I love this. This wheel set's old, but it rides like brand new. Now before I go and try and get some riding clips and some pictures of this bike in some good light, I want to mention a quick BMX story. This is partially connected to this bike, but partially just a really cool piece of BMX folklore. I was reminded of it when I was talking about this head tube being similar to what you would find on the Fit S series bikes. Do you remember a while back I mentioned that S&M was started by Chris Moeller and Greg Swingrover? Well, to my understanding, Greg left S&M pretty quick after the company was formed to take a job with GT. GT at the time, they were one of the biggest companies in BMX, so totally understandable. Now, Chris did an amazing job running S&M on his own, but the BMX community is pretty tight-knit, so if you own a BMX company, you're gonna know the owners of other BMX companies. Now here's another legend in the BMX world, is Robbie Morales. He is just as cool as Chris Moeller, to be honest. So Robbie Morales has a huge history in BMX. You might have seen some of the old Morales flatland frames, and as far as I understand it, he was involved with the design of the original Terrible One progression frame. And Terrible One was a smaller company, so they couldn't meet the production demand for that frame, and it was an amazing frame. It needed to be out there. Chris Moeller and Robbie Morales teamed up to create Fit Bikes, which is one of the more legendary companies in BMX now. You can see where I'm going with this. Like, the track record with Chris Moeller, anything he sets hands on is just gonna be... And it's the same thing with Robbie Morales. They created Fit Bikes to bring the T1 progression frame to the people in the form of the Fit S1 frame. And from there, Fit gathered a bunch of popularity. You got guys like Mike Aitken and his signature S-Series frames, and blew the BMX world away. I remember when I first got into BMX, if you didn't have a Fit Aitken frame, you weren't cool. Like, they were the hottest thing. Now, since moving on from Fit, Robbie started Cult, which is another amazing company that deserves a ton of respect. In fact, as far as modern classic frames go, the original Cult Death Row and Bad Boy frames, some of the most desirable ones out there. I had one and I regret selling it so much. If I could find that frame, I would back immediately. But Cult has something going for them that I find super admirable, is they are really supportive of women in freestyle BMX. Angie Marino has her own signature colorway on one of the frames, and she's so cool. You need to follow her. But one of the coolest things, in my opinion, is that they're, as far as I know, the first company to give a female pro freestyle BMX rider a signature frame all of her own. And that is awesome. Like, I'll see if I can find a picture of Paris's signature frame and put it up, because it is so cool. But back to S&M and Fit, both companies are still going super strong. They both make premium quality products, and they both have absolutely stacked rider lineups. Now the big difference between S&M and Fit is S&M is the true American, homegrown, made in USA frames. Fit, they're still just as high quality, or almost as high quality, but a lot of the stuff is made overseas. Now that's not a knock on Fit. A lot of bike products, actually 99% of bike products, are made overseas, but S&M just has that personal touch to it, which is why I think their frames are some of the best in the world. And right now, frames like Mike Hoder's BTM frame, just like everything else S&M makes, some of the coolest on the market. The way that they're kind of rock and roll and they parody a lot of things in BMX, but they blur the line between parody and reality. So they make a set of bars called the Perfect 10s. And when they first announced those, it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke about, look how big bars are getting these days, but they're actually a really good quality bar and people love riding them. So they put them into full production and they're a super popular bar right now. I don't know if they're as popular as S&M's Classic Slam and Gram Slam bars, but they are hugely popular. And I think S&M even makes the 11s now, like an 11-inch bar. So they have a good way of taking that crazy side of BMX and making it into reality and making it so it's actually workable. And I love that about them. Now, enough of me ranting. Time to go and get some clips of me riding this thing and to get some nice pictures of it. Well, that ended abruptly. So I figured, it's Tuesday, it's my day off, I might as well go to the skate park before all the kids are off school for the day, before it gets busy. I was wearing my helmet, but I didn't bother with the ankle brace, because I figured I wasn't going to do anything crazy. And I made one of the most classic mistakes out there. I wasn't paying attention when I stepped in a puddle, my shoe was soaking wet when I stepped on the pedal, and it slipped off as I was pedaling towards one of the ramps. And I don't know if I'm the only one here who's like this, but I really enjoy getting clips of myself crashing on video. Like, if I'm going to crash, I might as well get the enjoyment of watching it back on video and laughing at myself. But in this case, it happened like just a couple feet outside of frame, so it's not in footage. This is all I got. But the bike is not disappointing. Despite the fact that this thing is 17 years old, it rides like a modern bike, it looks pretty much like a modern bike. The only real sign of its age is the amount of rust on it. Like, this thing is nowhere near the end of its lifespan. And as much as there are much more well-known, more famous, more influential bikes out there, I personally think the S&M Blackbike is one of the most underrated bikes, more influential than anyone realizes. To my knowledge, not a lot of people even know this bike exists, because it's completely overshadowed by S&M's other more legendary models, and S&M is a company that sets the bar so high. But despite the fact that it's not the most well-known frame S&M has ever made, I think it's one of the best, and I think it deserves a lot more love than it gets.